The night was quiet until Sarah's phone buzzed with a message that shattered her calm. She opened it, expecting a reminder from work, but instead saw a photo of her ex-husband David holding another woman close. Her heart pounded as disbelief turned to rage. Memories of their past, promises broken and vows betrayed, flashed before her eyes. Sarah whispered, "How could you?" though no one was there to hear. That moment became the spark. A fire of revenge ignited deep within her soul, burning away hesitation. She knew she couldn't let this betrayal define her. For Sarah, this was no longer about heartbreak. It was about reclaiming her strength and showing David that betrayal never comes without consequence. The morning after, Sarah walked through her kitchen in silence. The smell of stale coffee lingered, and the house that once felt warm now felt like a hollow shell. She whispered to herself, "He took everything from me, but he won't take my power." Her resolve grew stronger as she packed away photos of David, one frame at a time, each glass crack echoing her broken trust. This wasn't just about pain anymore, it was about reclaiming control. Sarah felt the fire grow inside her, knowing the path ahead would be dark, but she was no longer afraid. Sarah drove across town, hands gripping the wheel tightly. Every red light felt like a test of her patience, but her mind was clear. Revenge was no longer an idea. It was a mission. "You thought I'd stay broken, David," she muttered. The city outside blurred by as her thoughts sharpened. She knew she would need strength, cunning, and allies to dismantle his facade. Every betrayal carries a cost, and Sarah was determined David would pay his in full. Later that day, Sarah met Emma, her closest friend, in a small cafe tucked away from the city rush. Emma's eyes widened as Sarah revealed the truth about David. "He betrayed you again," Emma whispered fiercely, her voice shaking. Sarah nodded, her tone cold. "This time, I won't cry. I'll fight." Emma placed her hand gently over Sarah's, her loyalty unspoken yet powerful. Together, the bond of friendship transformed into an alliance, one built on trust, resilience, and shared fury against betrayal. That night, Sarah stood alone in her bathroom, staring into the mirror. Her reflection seemed like a stranger, eyes hardened, lips pressed tight. She whispered, "No more tears." She removed her wedding ring, placing it beside the sink, the sound echoing like a final goodbye. With trembling hands, she wiped her tears, replacing grief with fury. Sarah didn't just see a broken woman anymore. She saw the beginning of someone reborn in fire, ready to fight back with strength David would never see coming. Sarah woke to the sound of the front door closing, the faint click echoing in the empty apartment. She sat up in bed, the sheets cold beside her. For weeks, David's late nights had become excuses, his phone locked, his smile a little too forced. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, the clock ticking past midnight, and poured herself a glass of water. Her reflection in the window stared back, weary, searching for answers she already feared. The silence pressed in on her chest until it was unbearable. She whispered into the glass, "Where are you, David?" Her voice cracked, carrying a mix of anger and dread. She wanted to believe he was working late, that she was imagining things, but her gut clawed at her with sharp certainty. Something was wrong, and denial no longer softened the edges. The following afternoon, Sarah found David in the living room, typing furiously on his laptop. His face lit up with forced calm when he saw her, but his eyes betrayed unease. She leaned on the doorframe watching him, her arms crossed. "Another late night?" she asked, her voice carefully measured. David didn't look up. "Just work," he muttered. Sarah stepped closer, her gaze locked on the phone lying face down beside him. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to reach for it, to see the truth hidden behind the black screen. Instead, she forced a smile, masking the storm inside. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a warning drum. She told herself, "Don't explode, not yet." The lies were threading tighter, and she could feel herself unraveling by the second. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She tossed beneath the sheets, her mind racing, replaying David's evasive glances and his rushed excuses. Finally, she rose, walking quietly into the study. The air was thick with the faint scent of his cologne, and on the desk sat his work bag, carelessly left open. Her hands trembled as she reached inside, pulling out crumpled receipts and notes. One receipt made her freeze, a dinner for two at an upscale restaurant she'd never been to, dated the night he claimed to be working late. Her breath caught, her pulse surging as though she'd been struck. Clutching the paper, she felt her world tilt sideways. She whispered through clenched teeth, "You liar." Tears pricked at her eyes, but rage steadied her grip. Proof had found her, and it burned. Morning light crept through the blinds as Sarah confronted David at the breakfast table. He sipped his coffee, pretending calm, while she placed the receipt between them like a blade. "In this," she demanded, her voice low but cutting. His eyes flicked down, and for the first time, his composure cracked. "It was business," he stammered. Sarah leaned forward, her nails pressing into the wood. "At midnight? With wine and dessert for two?" David's jaw tightened, his silence louder than any excuse. The space between them felt poisoned, the air thick with years of love eroding in a heartbeat. Sarah's chest ached, not just from betrayal but from the dawning truth. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Her trust had been shattered, and there was no repair. The day stretched endlessly, Sarah pacing the apartment as her mind replayed every memory, searching for the moments she'd ignored. Each laugh, each late meeting, each sudden change in his scent, it all stitched together into a cruel tapestry of deceit. Emma arrived by evening, her eyes filled with concern as she embraced Sarah tightly. "You don't deserve this," Emma whispered, her voice fierce with loyalty. Sarah clung to her, finally letting the sobs escape, her body shaking as years of suppressed fear spilled out. "I don't even know who I am anymore," Sarah confessed, her words muffled against Emma's shoulder. But Emma held her firmly, whispering, "You're stronger than he ever believed. This isn't your end, it's your beginning." For the first time in days, Sarah felt a flicker of something other than despair, the ember of resolve beginning to glow. Sarah sat in her car outside David's office, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She had promised herself she wouldn't become that woman, the one who stalked and searched for proof, but the lies had made her into something else. Through the tinted glass, she watched as he exited the building with a woman by his side. They laughed too easily, their bodies too close, her hand brushing his sleeve as though it belonged there. Sarah's chest tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing her lungs. "That's her," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. She didn't know the woman's name, but her smile carried a cruel message. "I've taken what was yours." A single tear broke free, but Sarah quickly wiped it away, her face hardening into something cold and unshakable. That night, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table, the apartment suffocatingly quiet. She replayed the scene outside his office in her mind, until every detail felt carved into her bones. Emma called, her voice steady on the other end. "You need to stop torturing yourself." Sarah clenched her jaw. "I saw them, Emma. He doesn't even try to hide it anymore." Silence hung heavy between them, until Emma finally said, "Then stop being his victim." The words struck Sarah like lightning, igniting something fierce. For weeks she had drowned in sorrow, but tonight sorrow turned to rage. She whispered to herself as she stared at her reflection in the dark window, "If he thinks I'll break, he's wrong. He has no idea what's coming." The following day, Sarah visited the cafe where she and David had shared countless mornings. The smell of coffee and pastries clawed at her memories, and she sat in the corner, staring at the table they once called. Her heart ached, but then she noticed the woman from the office, sitting across the room with a friend. Their laughter rang like shattered glass in her ears. Sarah studied her, every detail, the way she leaned back confidently, the smug curl of her lips, the diamond pendant glinting at her neck. Rage simmered beneath Sarah's calm surface, but she stayed silent, her eyes never leaving the woman. "You don't even know me," Sarah thought. "But you will." A slow plan began to take shape, as steady as the rhythm of her breath. That evening, Sarah confronted David again. He walked in late, loosening his tie, offering another tired excuse before she even asked. She stood near the doorway, arms folded, her voice firm. "Stop lying. I saw you with her." David froze, his face paling for just a second before his mask returned. "She's a colleague," he snapped, his voice sharp with defensive authority. Sarah stepped closer, her words low and deliberate. "Then why do you smile at her the way you used to smile at me?" His jaw clenched, and for a moment, silence screamed louder than any argument. Sarah felt something break inside, not from his betrayal but from realizing she no longer cared about his denial. His lies had lost their power, only her next move mattered. Sarah lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed faintly outside. She thought of every betrayal, every lie, every stolen glance between David and the woman. The pain was no longer a wound, it was fuel. Emma's words echoed in her mind. "Stop being his victim." Sarah whispered into the dark, her voice steady as stone. "He thinks he's clever, but he's about to learn who I am." She reached for her journal and began writing names, places, dates, every detail she'd gathered. The pages filled quickly, her plan no longer vague, but sharpening into focus. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't broken. She was becoming something David never expected. His reckoning. The morning after the gala, David's face was plastered across news headlines. His company stocks plummeted, partners withdrew, and whispers of criminal charges began. Sarah sipped her coffee, the bitter taste almost sweetened by the chaos she created. Emma said, "You've torn his empire apart overnight." Sarah answered quietly, "Not yet, he still thinks he can recover. I want him to feel what I felt when he betrayed me. Powerless." A spark of vengeance glimmered in her eyes, one that Emma feared would burn everything in its path. David stormed into his office, eyes bloodshot, rage spilling with every step. His secretary avoided his gaze, whispering among colleagues as he slammed doors. "Find out who leaked this," he barked, but deep down he knew. Sarah's face haunted him, her calm fury more terrifying than any enemy he'd faced. Alone in his office, he muttered, "Shall regret this." Yet doubt gnawed at him. For every move he made, Sarah seemed a step ahead. His pride cracked, and fear slipped into its place. Sarah met with her mentor Evelyn, who had once survived betrayal of her own. Evelyn's voice was calm, her words heavy with warning. "Revenge takes pieces of you, Sarah. Every strike you make cuts into you as much as him." Sarah replied, "He destroyed my life, this is justice." Evelyn studied her with tired eyes. "Justice and vengeance are not the same." Sarah hesitated but then clenched her fists. The path she'd chosen felt irreversible, even as shadows of doubt flickered in her heart. David's mistress confronted him that evening, her voice sharp with panic. "Everyone knows about us, David. My family is humiliated." He snapped, "You think this is about you? Sarah wants me destroyed." She stepped back, trembling, whispering, "Maybe you deserve it." His chest tightened, fury mixing with desperation. For the first time, he saw the life he built slipping from his grasp, not through enemies in boardrooms, but from the woman he had once vowed to love and betrayed without remorse. Sarah stood alone on a bridge overlooking the river, the cold wind biting her cheeks. She replayed Evelyn's warning, Emma's worries, and David's downfall. Her chest tightened with both triumph and unease. She whispered, "This isn't just revenge anymore, it's war." The water beneath flowed relentlessly, carrying away pieces of who she used to be. Yet in that moment, she knew she wouldn't stop until David had nothing left. The path was set, and her heart hardened with every breath. David sat in a boardroom surrounded by hostile stares. Investors who once praised him now questioned his integrity. He raised his voice, "This is temporary, I will rebuild." But murmurs drowned him out, his words fragile against the rising tide of doubt. Alone in that suffocating silence, he finally realized Sarah had weaponized his own pride against him. The betrayal that once belonged to her now consumed him. Sweat trickled down his temple as he tried to smile, but his empire was collapsing faster than he could lie. Sarah watched the news in Emma's living room, every headline documenting David's unraveling. Emma whispered, "You've broken him." Sarah answered, "Not yet. He still breathes confidence. I want him gasping." Emma looked at her with unease, her voice fragile. "And what about you? When do you stop?" Sarah's gaze lingered on the screen, the fire inside her burning brighter. "When I feel what he never gave me. Peace." Yet deep down she feared that peace might never come. David, drowning in panic, sought out Mark, his ruthless enforcer, the man who once cleaned up his messes. "Find her weaknesses, break her down," David demanded. Mark's jaw tightened as he replied, "She's stronger than you think." David slammed his fist, barking, "I don't pay you to admire her." But behind Mark's eyes was a flicker of doubt, an unwillingness to destroy a woman whose strength he had quietly come to respect. For the first time, David's power over his loyal shadow began to crack. Evelyn visited Sarah again, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your victory is hollow if it swallows who you are," she said. Sarah's eyes welled up, but her voice stayed steady. "He deserves every ounce of this pain." Evelyn sighed. "And what do you deserve, Sarah? Love? Healing? Or endless scars?" The words pierced through Sarah. But she turned away, unable to admit how deep the emptiness inside her had grown. Late that night, David stood on his balcony, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. The city stretched beneath him, indifferent to his ruin. He whispered bitterly, "She's turned my world into ashes." His mistress called from inside, but he ignored her. For the first time he felt utterly alone, his empire, pride and mask stripped away. And across the city, Sarah lay awake, staring at her ceiling, torn between satisfaction and sorrow, wondering if vengeance had made her whole or hollow. Sarah entered the courthouse, her heels echoing like thunder in the hushed halls. David sat at the front, pale but defiant. Lawyers shuffled papers, journalists whispered, and Sarah felt every eye burn into her. David muttered, "You won't win." She leaned close enough for him to feel her breath and replied, "I already have. You just don't know it yet." The judge struck the gavel, silence swallowing the room as the war between them began under the cold weight of law and truth. Emma clutched Sarah's hand in the hallway during recess, whispering, "This is eating you alive." Sarah forced a smile, though her hands trembled. "It's the only way I can breathe," Emma said softly. "But breathing doesn't mean living." For a moment, Sarah's chest tightened with doubt, but the roar of the crowd outside reminded her. This wasn't just about her heart anymore. It was about survival, dignity, and every scar David left behind. She straightened her shoulders, walking back into battle. Mark appeared outside the courtroom, his broad frame leaning against the wall, conflicted eyes fixed on Sarah. "He asked me to break you," he said quietly. "But watching you, I can't." Sarah's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then you've already chosen." Mark's jaw tightened, as though admitting loyalty to her meant betraying a piece of himself. "Be careful," he warned. "He's desperate, and desperate men don't fight fair." His words lingered in Sarah's chest as she stepped back inside, a storm gathering. During cross-examination, Sarah's lawyer revealed financial records, hidden accounts, secret transactions, proof of David's deceit. Gasps filled the courtroom. David shouted, "Lies, all of it!" But the evidence glared back, undeniable. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on him, her silence louder than any accusation. He tried to rise, fists clenching, but the bailiff's steady hand forced him back down. For the first time his mask shattered completely, exposing not power, but panic. Sarah felt the tremor of justice finally reaching her. As the day ended, Sarah walked out into the night air, exhaustion and triumph crashing together in her chest. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but she only heard the sound of her own heartbeat. Evelyn's words replayed in her mind. Victory could still destroy her if she let it consume her. She whispered to herself, "This isn't over. Not until I decide it is." The city light stretched ahead, and for the first time, Sarah wondered whether revenge was her prison or her freedom. The final day dawned heavy with tension. the courthouse alive with murmurs, as people filled the seats, waiting for the verdict. Sarah walked in with steady steps, her black dress sharp against the pale wood of the room. Her heart beat loud in her chest, yet her face was calm, carved from quiet defiance. David sat across the aisle, slouched, his once confident eyes darting, searching for a way out of a storm he could no longer control. His lawyer leaned in frantically, whispering desperate strategies that were already too late. The judge's voice broke through the noise, deliberate and final. David Miller is guilty of fraud and misconduct. Gasps and shocked whispers rippled like thunder across the room. David's face crumbled into disbelief, his mouth opening and closing without words, the mask of arrogance gone. Sarah inhaled deeply, her shoulders lifting and falling with slow, deliberate calm. This was more than justice. It was the severing of the last chain he held around her life. The courthouse steps exploded with sound as Sarah emerged, flashes and shouts crashing together like a storm. Reporters surged forward, microphones stretching toward her face. For a heartbeat, she wanted to run, but instead, she lifted her chin and raised her hand. The crowd hushed. Her voice rang out, steady and firm. This isn't just my story. This is about betrayal, about lies, about every person who was silenced by deceit and cruelty. Today, silence lost. Her words cut through the noise, landing heavy in the air. In the crowd, Emma's tearful smile caught Sarah's eye, and the weight of that simple support nearly broke her composure. But she held firm, speaking not as a victim, but as someone who had risen through fire. She didn't crave headlines, but she knew they would spread. For Sarah, this was not about fame or spectacle. It was about reclaiming the voice David had stolen. With each word, she felt the shackles around her spirit falling away. That evening, silence replaced chaos as Sarah sat across from Evelyn in the mentor's warmly lit apartment. A soft lamp glowed between them, casting gentle shadows on the wooden table. Evelyn poured tea into 2 cups, her steady hands betraying years of quiet strength. Sarah stared into the steam, her shoulders heavy from the day. Evelyn spoke first, her voice low. Justice is a strange thing. It feels heavy even when you win. Sarah let out a tired breath, her lips twitching into a weary smile. It feels like carrying fire, she confessed. Evelyn's eyes softened as she reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Sarah's. Fire destroys, but it also gives light. The choice is yours. What will you do with it now? Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, her chest tightening with the realization that this was not the end. It was only the beginning of another journey. Revenge was finished, but healing still stretched before her. Later that night, Sarah wandered alone along the riverside. The city lights shimmered on the water, rippling like broken pieces of glass stitched back together. Her heels clicked against the pavement, but her pace was slow, thoughtful. For years she had walked with weight chained to her chest, but now, step by step, she felt the burden lighten. She thought of David, not with rage, but with distance, as though he was already dissolving into the past. She whispered into the night air, her voice carried by the breeze. "You can't hurt me anymore." The words were soft but final, a release. For the first time in years she did not feel like a victim or a warrior. She felt like Sarah, scarred, yes, but whole, her identity no longer bound to betrayal. The night breeze wrapped around her like a promise, lifting her chin toward the future. The next morning, Sarah stood in her apartment bathed in golden light, the silence no longer suffocating but soothing. She wore soft casual clothes, holding a steaming cup of coffee near her lips. The city outside moved on, but she felt still, steady. Her phone rang, Emma's name glowing on the screen. She answered, and Emma's voice was warm and certain. "You're free now." Sarah closed her eyes, the words settling deep into her chest. She smiled faintly, whispering back, "Ice, and I finally believe it." Setting the cup down, she looked out toward the horizon, her reflection glowing in the glass. Her story of betrayal had ended, but the story of Sarah, reborn, unbroken, and filled with quiet hope, was only beginning. The chapter of vengeance was closed, but life was waiting, and this time, it was hers to write.